Yeah, y'all ready? I ain't know y'all ready. You ready?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today as we prepare to bring forth the unlawful manufacturing of firearms and prohibiting the possession, use, and transfer of the manufacturing of what is typically known as ghost guns. I want to thank you for Mayor Helfrich's support. I want to thank you for the support of my colleagues on council. Behind me, I have Vice President Betsy Buckingham. I also have Councilmember Teresa Janescu, and I thank you for them being able to be here and stand in unity. And I also thank you for the support of my council members not present, Councilmember Elspeth Buff and Councilmember Dr. Felicia Dennis. Thank you as well to Brandon Flood, Deputy Director of Government Affairs of Ceasefire Pennsylvania, for extending the anchor and partnering with us to bring forth this legislation here in the city of York, Pennsylvania, and for your forward-thinking work that you and your organization does to keep the residents of Pennsylvania safe every day. Unfortunately, here in the city of York, Pennsylvania, and cities across Pennsylvania and the United States, we have witnessed senseless acts of gun violence that have left our families and our community with layer upon layer of trauma. Therefore, any act and any legislative act that we as a city council represent here in the city of York can do to hopefully shut down senseless gun violence should be done. Today, council will proceed to vote on legislation that will add additional prohibitions on the use of three-dimensional printers to impose prohibitions relating to the transfer, the use, the conversion of unfinished firearms and certain equipment, as in our Article 702. These weapons that are better known as ghost guns are untraceable and they are untrackable, while unfortunately getting into the hands sometimes of our most vulnerable population, our youth as well as adults in our community. As reported by our York City Police Department, we have pulled over 20 ghost guns off of the streets of the city of York, Pennsylvania. We must do what we can to keep these types of dangerous weapons out of the hands of the wrong individuals. Although the Pennsylvania House of Representatives have passed House Bill 777 in March of 2024, led by State Representative Morgan Cephas, which prohibits the purchase, sale, and production of untraceable gun parts by closing the loopholes of the Uniform Fire Act, we need to urge our state senators to pass this important life-saving legislation by June. We cannot sit back. We cannot see a problem, that we know the lives of residents are at stake and that a change must take place, and do nothing strategically to advance that change. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. And today the silence is over. I stand boldly stating that the lives of our residents in the city of York, Pennsylvania matter, and the transfer, use, or conversion of unfinished firearms and certain equipment that are untraceable and untrackable must be put to an end by creating standards of accountability. Thank you very much. And next we will have Commissioner Mike Muldrow of the York City Police Department, and following him will be Brandon Flood, who is the Deputy Director of Government Affairs of Ceasefire Pennsylvania.
So good afternoon, everybody. Anybody that knows me and knows my story knows that I've been in this fight, the fight against gun violence, for over 24 years now. And while it's my chosen profession, people that really know me know that it's personal to me and to my family, having lost somebody that we love to senseless gun violence in the streets. And during the course of those 24 years, most recently these last 4, I'm often asked to speak up and speak out on behalf of communities like ours. Speak out about things that we can do to help curb that gun violence that so many of us are facing throughout the Commonwealth and this nation. And on these occasions, I often find myself calling for legislators to support us, the people on the front lines in this fight. Support us by giving us the tools that we need, like funding and manpower, technology, and legislation. Common sense legislation that makes their priorities clear. Legislation that helps cut things off at the source. Legislation that sends a message. A message that demonstrates that our elected officials really understand the assignment. A message that puts people before politics. A message that says that they support our officers and our interventionists, that they value the effort and appreciate the change that we've all seen in a community like York over this past few years. A message that, simply put, speaks out and says, we refuse to allow our neighborhoods to go back to being war zones. So to our city council, your vote today in this room is yet another opportunity for you to get involved, to aid in that fight, and to just plain do the right thing. And for that, I'd like to thank the folks from Ceasefire for coming down and being here to support, because I know you didn't have to. And take this opportunity to thank Councilwoman Washington for her willingness to champion legislation like this. Because in a fight this important, every bit that we do helps. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you, and I turn it over to my friend Brandon Flood.
Good evening, everyone. All right, and hopefully I can be proactive at answering some of the reporters' questions and my remarks here. So I'm going to touch on 4 points. I think the two preceding speakers have addressed this issue pretty robustly. Certainly, council has had ample opportunity to vet, as well as the solicitor, to vet this proposal, and certainly folks, community, as well as public officials have had ample opportunity to research this issue. So let me talk about four major points here. So what this isn't is a solution in search of a problem. In fact, this is a problem that demands a solution. This is a real issue that's impacting cities across the Commonwealth and is a scourge that's been identified by the ATF as well as prosecutors across the Commonwealth. These type of weapons are being recovered at an alarming rate and have grown in popularity, particularly amongst our youth, given the ease of accessibility. So, I know a lot of folks in the policy-making space like to say a lot of these initiatives are solutions in search of a problem. This is the complete opposite. The second piece I want to emphasize, in particular for those that are gun owners in the city, your ability to still privately make firearms will not be infringed upon. This ordinance, if enacted, will not prevent those who can lawfully possess a firearm from being able to privately make firearms. You would be able to do that by either purchasing a complete unfinished build kit, meaning not at 80%, but 100%, because it already has serial numbers. You already would be required to undergo a background check. So you still would be able to go that route. And if this ordinance is enacted, you can do what is dictated that will be dictated in statute, which is to obtain your federal firearms license to be able to sell or purchase. So wanted to address that. If you can lawfully own a firearm, your right to privately make a firearm will not be infringed upon. The third piece I want to talk about is this is not meant to be a panacea, right? We heard Council President Washington reference that we're waiting for the state to act, the Senate in particular. We're waiting for Congress to act. We're waiting for the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court to act. This is meant to be a stopgap measure. This allows council to be proactive. We know, as Commissioner Muldrow mentioned, localities have been hamstrung for decades from being able to address their needs when it comes to gun violence and have been held hostage by the state and by Congress because of these partisan divides. So this is meant to be a stopgap measure. I applaud council for being proactive and not being reactionary. So wanted to emphasize that. And then lastly, I know one of the common refrains or common questions that come up is about enforcement. So any law or ordinance is only as good as is only as good as our ability to enforce it. As such, this ordinance, if enacted, would enable York City, York County officials, parents, concerned citizens alike, gun owners to be creative in developing a game plan for what enforcement looks like in this city. These can include, but not be limited to, educational campaigns for gun dealers and prospective firearm purchasers, can include the provision of guidance to parents. We talked about how this issue affects young people, guidance to parents about what signs to look out for, what red flags to look out for when we're seeing these parts in their homes. And then also, it will allow us to kind of work collaboratively and be very laser focused in addressing these issues. As you heard earlier, where were 20 ghost guns recovered in the city. So we can be creative and we can use that synergy to be able to enforce this issue. So once again, I would like to thank Council President Washington for her leadership. Also want to like to thank Council as a collective body for seeing the value of this. Certainly would like to thank Commissioner Muldrow. You know, too often our folks in law enforcement aren't vocal about our needs. They remain neutral. The best you can expect from them is neutrality. So we applaud you for that. And certainly would like to thank the mayor for his support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brandon Flood. Thank you, Commissioner Muldrow. Thank you to my colleagues on council for being here with me today. Are there any comments from our guests here with us today? Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, you can probably answer this. The more than 20 guns taken off the streets, is this over the last year, the last 6 months? Do you know, is this like increasing, like say you took 5 off the street in the past month, or what is the range?
I believe it was, and well, I was going to say don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to get quoted. I believe it was 19 last year and 22 the year before. Thankfully, and I'm proud of this one because I think it's reflective of the work. Thankfully, we didn't have any this year, so thus far, but our number of seized and confiscated guns is actually down, which directly correlates with the number of shootings, the number of homicides, and the amount of violence that we're seeing in the community. So, and some of that is, like I said, reflective of the work that's being done not only by our officers but by the interventionists, TIFLO and the GVI team. But it's a real problem, and this feels like a real solution. I had the opportunity just today in the directors meeting to kind of reflect back and look at. I wish we would have got a chance to talk about this, but reflect back and look at an incident when I first started back here with the city in this position. I believe it was at the end of year 1. It had come to our attention through some of our investigators that we'll just say a local shopping area, a local flea market in the county was actually selling the 80% kits. The jigs, I guess they're called. I'm not a gun guy, so my guys were telling me, I guess they're referred to as jigs, but they were actually selling the 80% kits at this local flea market. There was an individual that was peddling them, and we were kind of reflecting on that today before I came to the directors meeting, and I shared with Mayor Helfrich and his staff that an ordinance like this, if it's passed, would actually give us some teeth to be able to address that. And while some might say, well, it's not a major penalty that comes along with it, it still gives us something to further that investigation with, something to stick the landing on, something to be able to go inside and tell somebody that we're not going to tolerate that, at least in this community. Can't speak for anybody else's, but you're not going to do that here. So I think that it's important, like Councilwoman Washington said, that we do link together and kind of lock arms and stand here and send a message that this is not going to be a bullet-ridden community by any means, whether it's ghost guns, whether it's switches and auto sears, whether it's legally purchased firearms that are sold to somebody else. We're going to take every avenue we can to shut things down here. And again, I'm just thankful that we have council people that are standing up. So I hope it passes tonight. Sorry.
If it does pass tonight, how quickly can we see some of these policies be enforced?
All right, let's go to Ms. Dye.
I don't want to stand up here, but I will
Come on, you look good. Come on up here tonight.
All of our ordinances by law has to go to the mayor for a signature, so he has 10 days to return that. And once he approves it, it's 20 days after he approves when it becomes law.
Also, was this, modeled after any other local communities?
Yeah, so Philadelphia was the leader in this space in 2021. They introduced an ordinance, the exact same ordinance. Obviously, that was subject to litigation. Ultimately, the Commonwealth Court affirmed the city's right or that ordinance remained lawful. They did appeal that to the PA Supreme Court, but we're pretty confident, given the scope of the ruling, that they will affirm that. So this is presumably, if York City passes it tonight, they'll be second, and the goal certainly is to further advance this initiative to other municipalities as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.